Hey reader, welcome back to the channel. This is Centaur here, and today we are taking a look at the vulnerable rule. Now, we've gone through a bunch of the rules regarding armor adjustments for armored vehicles. We've looked at things like armored all around, we look at things like reinforced front armor, and by consequence, reinforced rear armor on the Panzer III. We've looked at the weak side special rule, and in the case of the positive rules, we said they were really good because they give you pretty good defenses and they give you good coverage for a relatively small cost. For weak sides, I said that they're pretty bad because for a 10-point reduction on already very expensive vehicles, you really don't get much out of that. There's not really a way for you to be able to maximize on the point savings that you get while making your vehicle quite vulnerable to enemy fire, because of the fact that it's basically treated as one level lower effectively than it would be otherwise, and you paid points to upgrade your damage value one step higher. In the case of vulnerable, you would think that that would mean that vulnerable is bad because weak sides is bad and vulnerable is just that, but more than that. And yet, I don't think so. Obviously, I think there are some negatives attached to it. So I'm not of the mind that it's actually a really good special rule to include because it's very easy for your opponent to take advantage of the vulnerable special rule and turn it against you and potentially remove your stuff. However, some of the tanks that have been prized throughout the years, including as far back as 2nd edition and into 3rd edition, like the M3 Stuart that you see over there on the right-hand side, with all those extra beautiful light machine guns poking out of the front, they have the vulnerable rule. And in my opinion, vulnerable is murky. It has some negatives, sure, and it could cost you. So you do have to play smart. But it has some big advantages. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So to start off with, the theme and game mechanics that we're looking at, first of all, do not come to us from the vehicle special rules chart. So we've been kind of slowly but steadily working our way through a bunch of the vehicle special rules. This one is taken from specific profiles. It is not actually in the core rulebook, except in as much as I've taken it from the core rulebook in the entry for the M3 Stuart, among others, right? So its first appearance is on page 226, but of course you'll find it in lots of places because there are quite a few with those early riveted construction going on. And then, of course, as we go into the Get You By PDFs and the Armies of book, you'll find even more. But what this is supposed to represent is that using a riveted construction for the armor plating. So instead of one shaped hole that's all one piece, it's a bunch of pieces that have been built and bolted together. The result is that when under pressure, these pieces did tend to buckle more easily and burst at those rivets, thereby allowing shots in that would otherwise not get in on one cohesive hull. And so what this is supposed to represent is that all shots that go toward the side and the rear of the vehicle add an additional +1 modifier. So instead of sides giving a +1 to the penetration roll, they give a +2 to the penetration roll. Instead of the rear giving a +2 to the penetration roll, it gives a +3. Nice and simple, right? It's worth noting, top armor is not affected. Okay, so top armor is still a +1, like it always is. And there's no vulnerable and armored all around for pretty obvious reasons. And so because of that, it's not like, that this is always what it's going to look like, regardless of where it's at. And the points cost is a variable points cost. These tend to be on damage value 7, 8s, and 9s. And so the damage value 7 vehicles, like the Semavente Light, for example, is 15 points cheaper than a similar, light AT gun DV7 open-topped weapon for other nations. And then the damage value 8 options, like, for example, the M3 Stuart, they tend to be about 15 points cheaper than their comparable counterparts. And then you've got your M3 Lee, which is about 20 points less, thanks to the fact that, one, you can actually pay to remove vulnerable. So we know what it is. It's going to be 20 points less for something that's damage value 9, okay? Now, this is the same as in 2nd edition. It's undergone no changes. Even the points adjustments line up in terms of where these are at. And so you would think to yourself, okay, getting extra penetration to the sides and to the rear, especially on something like a DV9, is actually really bad. And I'm here to tell you, yeah, it's a negative. Anytime something finds it more easy to open you up and remove your unit, that's always a bad thing. But it's actually not that horrible, okay? And the reason why is a couple of things. First of all, if you're saving 15 to 20 points per unit you're taking, That is potentially a lot. That could be 1 to 2 extra order dice, especially if you're running an artillery platoon, which is a great way to be able to save yourself, max out your order dice and really pump it up to a really healthy and respectable number. See the KV1 video on ways to do that. It could mean 1 or 2 extra bodies added to your army, depending on what it is that you're looking at and the level of vehicle that you're including. Or it could just be giving yourself extra gear, all of which can move the needle. Right? Jumping to a squad with 7 men instead of 6 for 2 of your squads is actually advantageous, right? It's going to keep them alive longer. It's going to work better. Being able to add some extra equipment, like say a Panzerfaust that you otherwise wouldn't have, could be highly advantageous, right? And more than that, because of the fact that it's treating those damage value 8s and 9s like they're damage value 7 and 8, and really a DV7 much more like a really durable DV6, because damage value 6 soft skin vehicles, they don't get to roll on the damage chart. You still get to roll on the damage chart with this vehicle. And the penetration modifiers only apply to heavy weapons, so you still are not susceptible to small arms. But in this case, even though, yes, that is a lot of the surface area of a tank, so the Polish 7 TP that you see over there on the right-hand side, which is based on the Vickers E6, but slightly more up-armored, but it's vulnerable because it's all riveted construction. Like, yes, it is a more expensive option than taking a DV7, but that 15-point reduction basically cancels out the points increase to go up to damage value 8, because that's mostly a 20 to 25 point upgrade. Believe it or not, some books are inconsistent on this. Sometimes it's 25, sometimes it's 20. That's why I mention it here. But the result is that you're basically paying like 10 points more for higher level armor, which is like half the cost of reinforced frontal armor. And when you see it in that light, suddenly it looks pretty good, right? It's reinforced front armor for half the cost. And with DV9s, it is actually less than the upgrade in order to get to the higher upgrade level. So you're really getting reinforced frontal armor basically on a premium, right? And so with that in mind, as an upgrade, it actually works out, because your frontal armor is now more durable than it would be otherwise. Than if you're running 1 level lower on the damage chart. You're not paying that much more in order to get it, and if you can protect your sides, you're going to be okay. More on that a little bit later. But more than that, and this is the big thing that separates it from weak sides, because me and Ian have already talked about this, and I understand Ian's point about weak sides, and I'm not saying he's wrong. He makes really good points. Here's the deal. We can take this upgrade on damage value 7 and damage value 8 tanks, whereas weak sides only exists on damage value 9s, which means you have to take like a Flampanzer, Hetzer version at 145 regular, and that's the cheapest one you can get. With these guys, I mean, you could be taking tanks that are only 115 points, like the 7 TP over here. You can take them for as low as 70 points regular for a Semovente Light, which means you could easily free up 15 to upwards of 50 points, depending on what you're kitting out, which allows you to buy lots of things. That is a huge point savings. And it doesn't matter as long as you can keep the enemy to the front, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about next is, kind of how to optimize on this. But just know that since you can easily add 2 to 3 of these, you can take advantage of this special rule and the negative points reduction that you get way better than you can weak sides. Okay? And so how do we best utilize it? Here's that Semovente Light that I was talking about. That thing is crazy good. And if you're running Italy, you should totally pick up 1 or 2 of these. First things first, if you can place 1 to 2 sides near a building, a ruin, or a forest, that's going to be a good idea. Again, we talked about this with weak sides. The concept being, if somebody cannot fire through a ruin, a forest, or a building, it means the only way that they can get to that side and reliably put hits on your side arc, with or without giving you heavy cover, because that's the next question, right? In order to try to block it. But at the very least, they have to actually enter whatever that terrain is. And if they're entering it, then that means there's a very good chance, because of what most of the footprints look like for most terrain in this game, to make sure that they can fit well on boards and that they become playable tables for you to use, is that you can perform an advance order, or in the case of something like the Polar 7 TP or something else with a turret on it, you could just perform a fire order and turn your turret. And there's a very good chance you're going to be at point blank range, which is really, really good. So yes, you've invited some danger to yourself, but it's actually a trap. You're actually inviting the enemy to come into danger with you. Second, if that is not available to you, or if it is not advantageous for you to place the vehicle there, because obviously Sometimes people are going to place objectives nice and wide out in the open where where it's a little harder to use stuff. You can always place another armored vehicle on one or either side in order to give it hard cover and then just move it up deep enough into the board with enough protection around the edges to make sure people can't get around to your rear. If that's the case, they might have to take you head on the entire game. And if that's the case, you got a 15 to 20 point reduction for no downsides, right? Because again, your front armor is taking none of those negatives. Now, there is another way you can go about doing this. It is mostly useful in case you have some of those side objectives or really far-flung places you need to get to, or maybe you're trying to do a breakthrough scenario, and so you're trying to get to the enemy deployment zone. One of the safest places to go is further and further to the edge because there's more and more units of your enemy that are going to be out of range. You can run it near a board edge, and in that way, you're able to make it so that somebody would have to be right there on the board edge in order to really hit you in that one side, which is not horrible. Things to keep in mind. Number one, it does get easier to hit you in the side arc of your other side because of the fact that more and more of the board is exposed to it. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Second, and more than that, if your opponent has outflankers, especially outflankers that are using something like, AT rifles or Piats or bazookas or something else like that, just know you are in extreme peril. Okay, because not only is it going to be relatively easy to get to your side, it'll be very easy for them to advance onto the board or advance out of a vehicle and hit you in the rear, and now they're getting a +3 to that penetration instead of the normal +2, which is, again, really, really bad. Okay, so you can do this. I would probably only do this in like a last-ditch scenario where that's the only thing that's realistically going to work, because it does come with some trade-offs. Or if you're playing one of those nations that can restrict the amount of outflanking that your opponents do, then that could be really nice. And then you can also just kind of focus on punching first. This is actually not a bad idea, right? So if your fear is, oh no, somebody could try to crack me open, if you crack open that tool or pin down that tool or cause that tool to have to rally on a given turn, then you don't have to worry about those AT guns. You don't have to worry about those autocannons, right? And so that's kind of the best way to think about it, I think. Okay. But furthermore, if you're going to be saving points, especially 15 to 20 points in a single swing, make it count. Okay. You can save 20 points by taking an M3 lead without vulnerable, and I would highly recommend doing that. I would also recommend that you keep easily catches fire. Check out our video on easily catches fire as to why you should keep that one. But one of the things that you can do if you choose to keep the vulnerable and instead just choose to eat those points is you can use that to bulk up your infantry squads to make them a little more durable. You can use it to take an extra Jeep for moving up your guys. Maybe even taking some of those transports at a higher veterancy level to make sure that they activate more reliably. Don't use it to upgrade your company commander to regular or veteran, okay? Don't use it just to buy AT grenades on somebody. We did this whole thing in the AT grenades video. It's not worth the trade, okay? If you're going to take this, maximize on it. And one of the best ways to maximize on it is to take like 2 or 3 of them, okay? I've been playing around recently with multiple 7 TPs for Poland. I don't like it as much as I like the TKS, but I will say this. It was really nice having way more AT guns than I have normally had so that I could actually challenge armor if I really needed to. But it was also really nice that I could have all of those plus an extra AT rifle to help out that I couldn't afford otherwise, right? If I was taking the Renault options that don't have that from the same list, I wouldn't be able to have those options. Okay. And so I really like the vulnerable special rule. I think that it works out really well. I'm not one of those people who thinks you should always take it. Again, I tend to get rid of it on my M3 Lee because if I'm running Americans and I'm running a DV9 tank, I need that guy to be a brawler. And that means I don't want to worry about somebody flanking and getting around him. That doesn't work for my style. But for a lot of people, especially if you're finding that you're hitting a wall with your current army and you're like, what do I do about this? Take a look and see if there's a vulnerable tank. I know it looks bad, but just try it, okay? And then just protect its sides, protect its flanks, protect its rear, keep it safe, okay? But you'll find you have more firepower than you had before, or you have more durability on your infantry sections than you had before, and that is very useful. But what do you think? Do you think that this should just be bad? Am I being too gracious to this thing? Is it the case that by just inviting so much risk, maybe this should fall into the bad category? Maybe it's in the good category because it takes a tank and it just reduces its cost while still giving it the same amount of effectiveness because maybe you believe in holding them really far back so that they never have to worry about people flanking around them. Let us know down in the comments below, and I will see you next time.